Vale. Bueno, si os parece, empezamos.
If you deem it appropriate, we'll begin. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for attending this session, for those of you who are here on site and those of you who are with us online. It's a session about how to communicate urban food policies. We'll have a number of presentations. I will begin with a brief overview of the topic and some of the challenges that we face around communication. Then we'll hear from Hugo Salomão from Belo Horizonte. He'll tell us what they are doing there. Then Holly Freistad from the city of Baltimore, who will join us live as it is 2 a.m. there by video. Then Kira Hopfeld from Praia will speak, and Angela Blair, also from Brighton, to tell us the story of what they are doing at the communication level. This session will be held in English and Spanish. If anyone needs your translation service, your translation equipment, that is, you can pick it up outside. Welcome to the English channel if you're listening. And I am ready to present. And my slides are in English as a professional default mode, but let's switch over to English.
Policies. We thought it was very important to put communication at the heart of what we're doing. Why is communication important? Urban food policies, one of the big aims or one of the big objectives is actually to democratize food systems by empowering cities and facilitating their participation in policy development and implementation. Therefore, how we communicate what we're doing, how we involve people, and how we work across different actors and agents is key. And in many cases, communication is sometimes an afterthought. So we thought it was very important to put it at the center of some of our conversations because it can really help us have successful projects that are really embedded within our communities and have a bigger impact. So I'm just going to highlight some key challenges around communication. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is actually to communicate that food is an urban issue. All the people that were here were very aware that food is an urban issue, but we still have to fight within our municipalities, in the public sphere as well, to make sure that food is regarded as a thing that is central within cities' lives. Here we have some pictures of Barcelona, and I think in the first one we can really see that food was part of the city, and in the second one it is not that clear anymore. But it is a key challenge to actually make food as part of one of the key responsibilities and one of the key preoccupations and one of the key aspects that we need to highlight within cities as a key concern and as an opportunity as well. So I highlighted 3 types of challenges in terms of communication. I think the first challenge is how we communicate within the city councils. The first question is, where does food sit? And in many cases, it's nowhere. When we start working with food, food is everywhere, but it's nowhere at the same time in terms of who is responsible, which department, which section within our local administration. And we always talk about this importance of this cross-sectoral approach, but also we have many, many issues within our cities that require this transversal working across many departments. And in some cases, cities report, well, there are such a big list of things that we need to work across departments that it's getting very complicated to raise a new issue that has to be worked across the spaces. And not only that, we are in many cases, we're working in many participatory spaces. So there are many participatory processes going on at the same time within the city, within different departments. And that makes it difficult to create a new one. Here there's, I think, a very nice figure by colleagues from University in London, where they show how many sectors and activities are linked to what is food, and we can imagine how that translates to the responsibilities and the activities of the municipality and what are the challenges associated to that. One example that some of the some cities were reporting was this part of how during the pandemic social services were a key were a key actor within delivering food and assuring food security within cities, and therefore they had this new role of food being central to what they were doing. And this is one of the examples of how different departments just get involved in food in different times and at different speeds. So that's one of the key challenges. The second challenge is the lack of skills and training around food, but also around co-production processes. How people that work within municipalities actually get used to work with others, maybe within the municipality, but also outside the municipality, and also skills around, but how we tackle food issues, what are the food challenges, what can cities do, what type of programs, what type of things we can do, and there's not much training around this, and neither there's much time, so we have limited resources within municipalities to train the human resources. There are also challenges linked, related to the links between politicians and civil servants, and what some of the agendas are driven by the politicians within the council, and what civil servants can actually do, and how we make those links better and that work in a more fluid way. And finally, there will be things around motivation. We know that there are people within city councils that are very motivated, that are very committed to food, that feel connected to this topic, but in some places it's difficult to find these champions. So a key challenge is to motivate and really find these champions within our city councils. The second one will be communication across administrative levels, and this has also different types of challenges. So different administrations have different agendas. They also have different speeds in terms of like when do they want to do things, what is like a priority for them, and they also have different levels of commitment sometimes to food. And we can see that very clearly with cities now taking the lead around food, and sometimes regional and national governments lagging a bit behind with this approach that cities are taking in terms of integrated food systems. So we can see that communicating when priorities and agendas and speeds are very different can be a key challenge. Sometimes there are also lack of platforms for coordination. If we say that it's difficult to coordinate within a city council of creating these common spaces where we can work across sectors, imagine having that at different levels with different departments. That creates a very complicated space, and we need to really think what is an efficient platform that will allow us to maintain this integrated approach, and at the same time that we're able to do things and it doesn't become a very burdensome structure. And the final one is what type of decision spaces we have, or spaces with capacity to do things that work at a multi-level, that have multi-level capacities. And one of some conversations that I had with some cities, they really like the city region approach, but they say, we don't have the structures to implement a city region approach. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the administrative or the bureaucratic space to actually have powers over the city region. So as a concept, it's a very nice concept, but how do we actually do things? How do we operationalize this type of approach? So there's something about how our bureaucratic and administrative structures are limiting us in some way, and how we can be innovative around these things. The final challenge is communication with citizens, and I think we will hear quite a lot about this today. It is very important to communicate opportunities for citizens to engage, not only in policy reform, but also in specific actions, which many times just ground what we're talking about when we talk about food policies. What are we actually talking about when we talk about an integrated food policy? Maybe it's a school meal, maybe it's a specific type of infrastructure, maybe it's reforming a market, maybe it's changing my food environment. So it's very important to not only talk about big strategic projects, but also getting people involved in actually doing things, because we need them to have a real impact and to design programs that are effective. And one of the key debates is how we ensure equitable representations in policy spaces of diverse groups, how we actually ensure diversity, and whether we go for forms of participation that is one type of actor, one seat, or we actually think that there's some groups that should be more represented because of they are representing, for example, vulnerable groups, or we're going for another type of approach. And this is a very complicated conversation that I think many cities are constantly having. How do we ensure this equitable participation in a way that we can move forward, work with different people, but at the same time, we make sure that vulnerable groups and people at the margins of the food system can be represented. And I think another challenge is how we include youth in these conversations as well. As we know, they are not only the future, but they are here now, and they have a lot to say and a lot at stake. So we really need them to be part of the change that we're trying to implement. In terms of how we include these groups that we can call the margins of food systems are more affected by the negative impacts of food systems. One of the key challenges is that normally these people are time poor as well, and it's difficult to engage them in complex processes. We're talking about women, we're talking about people with less resources, we're talking about farmers as well, which are normally quite time poor. And there are many experiences and many projects that are trying to implement this vision of experts by experience, of including these voices by elevating their expertise as essential in order to see what are their challenges and how we can actually overcome them. The next challenge would be how we develop in processes of developing, for example, a food strategy or developing a food policy, how we establish the criteria of participation. Who establishes that criteria? Why? Who represents who? Who is representing what? Are all the interests need to be represented? Yes, no, just maybe organizations that don't have an economic interest behind it, or maybe not. So there are many debates around this, and I think also one of the key and the last challenge is how we change our culture of spaces of representation where I go there to represent my group and to actually negotiate to get benefits for myself and my group, to a space of deliberation where we collectively co-produce some outcomes where everybody feels represented and we'll give and get some things out of this process, but we also maybe lose some things, because in the current state of things, we know that there's we will need to give, there are some trade-offs that we need to face, and therefore it's important to think about how we face conflict and these transitions of winning and losing, which are inevitable in every change. So this is a bit my analysis of what are the challenges around communication, and we're going to be hearing more about solutions today. What are cities actually doing to overcome some of these challenges, and what are their experiences? And I hope they tell us a lot about what are they gaining from giving a space and time to communication, but also maybe build a bit on these challenges as well. And at the end, we can maybe all think about collective solutions. So this is the order that we're going to have the speakers today. We have a very diverse set of speakers, and we will start with Hugo, and he will tell us all the things that we need to know about communication in Belo Horizonte around their very successful and long urban food policy. So Hugo, if you want to come up.
Se cambia aquí. Thank you very much, Ana. Buenos días, muchas gracias. Yo voy a hablar en la lengua oficial de América Latina.
I will be speaking Portuñol, the official language of South America. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for inviting me. It is truly a pleasure to participate in this forum at Belo Horizonte, having an agenda and a policy with a very long history in Latin America and Brazil, nearly 3 decades of a well-structured, ongoing policy that is expanding all the time. I think it's our most internationalized public policy. We have received hundreds of delegations from all over the world, Latin America, Africa, Europe, to exchange experiences and practices that we have developed over the years. And as a city that puts its effort into international cooperation as a development mechanism, that is also true for us. We are the coordinators for the Milan Pact in the Latin American region. We form part of the steering committee. And it's an opportunity to share what we know here today and to learn from others. And we believe that this is a very powerful policy to get better results overall. If you're not familiar with it, Belo Horizonte is the third biggest city in Brazil after Sao Paulo and Rio. Our metropolitan population is 6 million. As I say, it's the third largest metropolitan area and the seventh in all Latin America. As I said, for some 30 years we've been working with this food safety policy, and for 5 years in international cooperation. We've been signatories to the Pact since 2015, and we're on the steering committee now, as I said, representing Latin America. Let me talk about strategies and how we conduct our communication in our city. This is probably one of the key points for any strategy and the implementation of a properly designed strategy. We have a food safety and nutrition sub-secretariat, and it's within the social services secretariat, and they are responsible for restructuring all of the communication of the agenda, along with universities, the private sector, civil society, citizens in general. So it's very important to have this constantly working structure to offer all of these services. These are hundreds of millions of meals served every year in Brazil in school lunchrooms and on the streets. Therefore, it's important to work properly on this so that citizens and people throughout our territory know what we're doing and how they can participate in the process as well. When it comes to food education and nutrition education in Belo Horizonte, we can identify some activities. It's a project that is taken into schools so that from the schools, children can go back home and have an impact there with their parents, families, friends, and so forth. The project is based on communication activities. They promote the mobilization of this population for them to adopt healthy or healthier dietary habits. It's based on dialogue and the collective construction of knowledge. We have a project within this structure called the Food Squad. And at schools, they put on little plays or music workshops, group activities, they share recipes and distribute educational materials that are specifically based on diet and nutrition. And for teachers, there's also a technical support program to adapt daily classroom activities for them to use tools, be it on-site or online, that have to do with food safety. There's also a virtual space now in the context of the pandemic. This has become important, and there, students, teachers, and the population in general, or the school community in general, can find activities related to this topic, as well as sharing them with their families. One example of those activities would be these leaflets that contain lists of games for children, nutritional picnics, family cooking, good desserts, and training on the origins of food, catalogs of recipes, practical, easy recipes for kids, or for anyone actually, that can be made. As we change routines, and that is a challenge, changing routines because of the pandemic, and That allows families to get away from always repeating the same thing, doing the same thing, allowing them to be creative. And what we call the nutrition library, the Nutriteca, with information on food and nutrition, activity, workbooks conceived to promote a balanced diet and physical activity that have to do with this. And from a recreational standpoint, we also have nutritional education podcasts, along with informative leaflets, books, and general collections with information on food or diabetes or other things that can be of interest. The food safety circuits that we have in our city are also public spaces that bring together the government sector, the educational community, social organizations, and others that all promote different actions for the mobilization around this topic: education, growing of foods, farmers, educators, all of them sharing the goal to promote education, care for health, solidarity, attaching value to gastronomy. We're also a creative gastronomy city because of status awarded by the UNESCO a few years ago. So the importance of our policy has also been recognized that way with creative gastronomy. These are also spaces that promote access to public services, agendas of rights and citizenship, and promote the experience and to track the route of food from farm to table, so to speak.
Talking about now of training, of trainers, we have schools like a key center for these training of values and lifestyle, so that it is an adequate space. Well, the school is a place where you learn main values, so that you can also promote health agendas and food practices which are healthy. So we have training cycles for teachers, for the professionals of the municipality for food, and the goal is to turn them into knowledge multipliers and practices in that respect. So to this effect, we have a guide of the trainer. You can see it there, you can download it online, and it has been created by the team of the food safety team, the University of Minas Gerais, the Secretary of Education, and other institutions such as the Ministry of Education, so that they have to be taken into account for the multiplication of this knowledge, this dissemination of this knowledge, and now it is on site and online. Next. And the offices that mobilize people through education actions, adopting practices of healthy food, and the subjects are nutrition and feed, healthy cooking, and empowering for recycling for food manipulators, so that they may be better used, made the best of, and technology based on the knowledge building, collective knowledge building. We are going to build all we want to know and that we want to implement, and the public, the audience is students, fathers, teachers, coordinators, social institutions, general institutions of the municipality, and others. Food processors and reference centers for social assistance, small producers, and communities of the town. owners of trade licenses that we have all over the town and the academy. And talking about popular participation in this general building of public policies, there will be, I will talk about mainly about two of these spaces. The first one is the Municipality Council of Food Safety of Belo Horizonte, Concern, and its president participated in a workshop yesterday with us, and the goal is to guarantee the constitutional right of an adequate food for all human beings and articulations for the areas of the municipal government, the organizations of society will be able to implement joint actions towards fighting poverty and hunger in the municipality and to promote public and private associations to guarantee the mobility of campaigns and agendas to raise awareness of public opinion. And this committee, this council, is made up by 24 councillors, and a third belong to the municipality and 2/3 from civil society. And the best possible to guarantee the best possible popular participation. And these meetings are held once a month, and if necessary, more often. And then the School Food Council, which is more in the education secretary, but it is a space for education, for training, and their role is to check that the students receive an adequate and healthy food for kindergarten and other schools at the municipality, created by representatives of education workers, students, parents, and other entities of civil society. So I think I'm going to stop here for the moment. Thank you so much for your attention, and it has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Hugo. Siempre es
Thank you so much, Hugo. It's always fascinating listening, hearing things about Belo Horizonte, and particularly specific things, and the point of view on policies. There are many questions I already have, but we'll keep them for later. Now we hear the holy-faced video from Baltimore, who was unable to be with us due to traveling restrictions, but she sent us a video, and we are very grateful for it. So we'll now reproduce the video. We'll play the video.
Good morning. I'm Howard Prescott. I'm the Chief of Food Policy.
Buenos días, soy la directora y lo siento no podré estar en Barcelona con vosotros hoy para comunicar cómo la ciudad de Baltimore implementa sus comunidades. En esta presentación tenemos un simposio y un departamento de planificación. Yo soy la directora de planificación y una planificación de división, de resiliencia, de acceso a la comida. Y el primero es una colaboración interagencias. Vemos aquí que tenemos 19 agencias que trabajan sobre el sistema alimentario. La segunda es la Coalición de Acción de Política Alimentaria, con 90 participantes, con organizaciones, academia y otros oficiales. Todos trabajan en ese sentido. Y una tercera parte es los consejeros de equidad alimentaria de los residentes, con 15-20 años, con 15-20 personas que aconsejan sobre cómo debe, en qué dirección debe ir la ciudad. Y tenemos una ciudad empeñada para crear un sistema urbano resiliente y equitable. equitativo. De lo que quiero hablar es cómo comunicamos las políticas alimentarias a través de nuestros planes. Tenemos dos sesiones, una que es la de apoyar la política, uno de reforzar y amplificar la economía local, y la otra es incrementar la resiliencia en las casas, en la comunidad y en los sistemas alimentarios. Implementamos este plan para un plan que vemos aquí. La siguiente sección es sobre agricultura, es otro componente, la agricultura urbana, y es el trabajo para promover una producción responsable socialmente, sostenible y medioambientalmente. Y esto es un ejemplo de cómo la ciudad está implementando las estrategias y políticas en un plan. Y el segundo componente es cómo se convierte los incentivos impositivos de impuestos en políticas alimentarias, con incentivos de impuestos sobre la propiedad privada, el crédito en los supermercados y con crédito de impuestos. Luego tenemos permisos, reglamentos, códigos y el acopio. Y esta es una panorámica de quiénes somos y lo que son nuestros planes y nuestras políticas, lo que hemos alcanzado para los cambios, cambiando de marcha. ¿Cómo comunicar? ¿Qué instrumentos tenemos? Tenemos mapas, reportes y datos. Entonces, en los últimos 10 años, la ciudad ha creado entornos mapas de entornos. Hemos creado estos mapas para educar y comunicar. Y este es un ejemplo de una área de prioridad de comida saludable. Este es el aspecto de 2018 y miramos no únicamente la distancia a tiendas alimentarias, sino cuál es la disponibilidad en un radio de 1/4 de milla de los habitantes. Y con estos datos y con este mapa hemos creado una descripción de unos distritos legislativos de regional y de barrio. Y hemos hablado con ellos, en estos 3 distritos, y hemos visto cómo tienen distintas prioridades en sus agendas, y si se trata de asistencia a la comida, y hemos usado estos instrumentos para priorizar las acciones. Y estas son las estructuras que teníamos. Y luego llegó el COVID-19 y entonces lo que hemos utilizado son las herramientas, y nos hemos dado cuenta de que de un día para otro la inseguridad alimentaria empezaron con el lockdown y se cerraron 200.000 residencias que fueron impactadas, y no sabíamos qué hacer.
Data layer for SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that is a federal program that gets implemented in the state of Maryland. And we have around 194 residents who are using that program. And it's a sum of money they can use to go shopping at grocery stores. Is a quick synthesis of that. And you can see here, the number grew significantly. So with understanding this need, we decided during COVID-19 that we needed to create new briefs. COVID-19 food environment maps and briefs. We created a city brief and also 14 council district briefs. And also, it's important to note that during COVID-19, our food environment changed. We needed to implement at scale food distribution and food assistance. So on this map, we're showing all the interventions that we have been providing with the city to minimize hunger and promote nutritional security. So this is an example of how we're using briefs and maps to communicate to electeds. Another way to communicate food policy is through data and dashboards. And here is an example of a dashboard we created during COVID-19 that is really just showing how much food is getting distributed and how it's growing over time. And we are now developing a new dashboard related on food systems. So this whole concept of dashboards also will adapt and evolve over time, but it's a way for the public to really see and have a transparent view of what the city is doing and tracking related to food systems. And the third way that we are communicating is through our reports. So most recently, we created our strategy to improve nutrition security and minimize hunger report. It was just released this past May, so please review it. And then other reports we've used and created is the Food System Resilience Report and the Food Environment Report from 2018. So that's an example of reports, maps, data, and dashboards. Now I want to talk about people, resident engagement. So one of the ways that we engage stakeholders and residents is through our resident food equity advisors. And every year we have a new cohort of residents, and it's a 1 to 2 year commitment. There's a different theme each year or every couple of years, depending on the theme. We have 15 to 20 residents, and they're always being pulled from the city at large, whether it's our council districts or our public housing sites. We have multiple meetings with them. We pay them for their time and expertise. And at the end, they create recommendations for the city to implement with their assistance. So we've had so far 2 key themes. The one on the left, the most current one related to food and public housing. I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. And the one to the right, where we convene resident equity advisors to provide strategies on corner and convenience stores and how to create a healthier, more viable food environment. So the most recent one is our public housing resident food equity advisors. We had 13 residents from 8 public housing sites, and they created recommendations for the city. And you can see here that they set a vision, and then there's key components. One on SNAP benefits, which I just discussed, some strategies to improve it, growing food, food assistance, and food retail. And the residents are really key in centering the lived experience and the resident voice to guide the city and all our partnerships and networks in creating food system change. The second area is really the role of networks to communicate food policies. And so in the networks, and these are just a couple examples, is the United States Conference of Mayors established a food policy task force. Baltimore City has a long-standing history of chairing or co-chairing that task force. Currently, Mayor Brendan Scott is the co-chair with Mayor Bowser from DC. This task force convenes mayors across the United States representing cities who want to implement and create change related to food systems, from food assistance to hunger to urban agriculture to food retail, a very wide food systems perspective. And this has also been the network that we've used to have other cities sign on to the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact. So that is one network that's been really important in sharing with cities how best practices and guidance on how cities are implementing and communicating food systems and food policy, but also learning from the international community and signing on to the Pact to do so. The second component of the network here is the United States Conference of Mayors Food Policy Advisors Network. And that are all the people like myself, the food policy directors or chiefs or advisors. Our names may change based on cities. We have over 24 cities. We support our mayors in implementation of the task force, but we also are the ones implementing in our cities. And many of us have signed the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, and we're using those indicators and embedding them in our plans and strategies. So now I'm moving to the concluding slides, and I want to give you a quick summary of what I just discussed. Tools to communicate food policy. We've just discussed how we use food environment maps and briefs, how we use data and dashboards, reports, our resident food equity advisors and community engagement, our networks, and the last one is using the media and press events, so sort of mass communication, press events, social media, and so forth. So that is a quick overview of Baltimore City, who we are, what we do, and how we communicate food systems and food policies. Thank you so much for your time, and I truly appreciating the opportunity to present to all of you today. Thank you very much.
Quizás Holly luego vea la.
Well, having seen the recording, I think that their ideas are very interesting in a different context, and we invited Holly. These are the type of things we thought were very relevant for our debate. That is the initiative of food equity advisors and the diagram she shows at the beginning of all the agencies within the town, these spinal-centric. I use it a lot in my presentation to explain the complexity of how food is treated in some towns. Now we move on to Angela Blair, who's food policy coordinator, Brighton and Hove Municipality. She is based in Brighton and Hove. I think she is on Zoom, so we'll see her in a moment on the screen. Angela's been connected to her is 1 hour earlier and half an hour before the session started. So we're really grateful for her effort. Hello, Angela, can you hear us?
Hi,
Hello?
Angela. Yes?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you perfectly.
Buenos dias. Buenos dias.
Thanks a lot for joining us. I was saying you have been connected for a while now, and it's an hour earlier for you, so you had a very early day today. So thanks a lot for the effort.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry I can't be there, but it's been fantastic to listen to the previous two presentations from Hugo and Holly. Wonderful work that's happening in Belo Horizonte and in Baltimore. So my name is Angela Blair, and I'm the food policy coordinator in Brighton and Hove in the UK. And that's actually a new post within the Economic Development Department in City Regeneration and Development. So I'm just going to move to my next slide. So this session, we share learning from the City of Brighton and Hove about how we communicate and coordinate action within and beyond the City Council, and also how we enhance citizen involvement and public support for transformative food policies.
We're having issues putting your slide up as well, so we're going to just give us a second so we can do the two things at the same time. So, just a sec.
Okay.
Okay, so Angela, now we're seeing your screen. If you can make we can see your presentation now from your screen. So if you can just put it in presentation mode.
Okay. Sorry, there's a delay with the slide.
Okay.
Is this clear?
Well, if you can press down where is the screen of the presentation mode, or I think with F5 as well. Okay, we see your notes now as well.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Okay, perfect now. Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, that worked perfectly in the technical text.
That's okay.
Okay, I'll go faster now to make up time.
No, we have time. Don't worry, we have time.
Okay, so where is Brighton? You'll be wondering. So it's just down there in the south of England. It's about an hour away from London and across the channel from France. just under 300,000 people in the population. So the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, I'm giving this presentation today on behalf of our food partnership, which is a not-for-profit organisation working across all areas of the food system within Brighton and Hove. Brighton and Hove was one of the first UK food partnerships and developed one of our first food strategies in the UK. So the food partnership was formed, it was way back at the beginning, it was about 2003 that they developed their food strategy. I'm very sorry, there's a delay. Okay, so I'll just jump onto this slide. Well, the way that we communicate and coordinate, the primary way is through our approach. You can see in this diagram here that the roots of a successful food strategy lie in its approach, like we just heard before. And the key elements are having a food partnership, having an action plan, being part of a network. And in the UK, we have a very excellent network organisation called Sustainable Food Cities. Also about making it about your place and getting adoption of the food strategy at a strategic level. And remembering that prevention is better than cure. So in Brighton and Hove, it's very similar to the setup we've heard in the previous two examples, but remembering this is an independent organisation that's working very closely with the City Council. I don't seem to be able to call up the next slide. Okay, so the next slide was about awards. Awards are another tool that we use in Brighton and Hove. Similarly, we heard about the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact Award. Last year, Brighton was very proud to have been awarded a Sustainable Food Places Gold Award, and that's meant a great deal to the city. The process, the journey of achieving that award has revealed how we can create a more sustainable, resilient city and equitable city. It was a long process, but increased visibility of all kinds of practical actions. And collectively, they're very ambitious and show the vision for the city as a whole. Within the award process, there was also the development of pledges, which we found to be extremely useful at communicating very clearly positive actions to businesses and to schools, to organisations across the city, and pledges that can be used across all different places in the local environment. And also we used campaigns, various campaigns at different times across the year in coordination with national bodies. I have a slide showing the National Day of Action on Food and Climate that we aligned with the Sustainable Food Cities Network. and that was coordinated, and really the message was translated by the Food Partnership, with the Council supporting and amplifying that message. So I'm just going to tell you the rest of the presentation because I can't move my slides on. We also use different programs to embed the food strategy actions. So some of those programs include, for example, at the Council, the carbon neutral 2030 strategy. And also we have the circular economy food programme, where we embed actions into wider policy work. We also have planning advisory notes that have been developed, and we work to influence planning and development. And we have the good food buying standards, which are focused on food procurement also. So I was also going to talk about geographical scales and how we work from the individual within our city, the citizen level, through to the local with the Brighton and Hove Food Strategy Action Plan, to the city region, which this is new work that we're extending into with the Greater Brighton City region, with another 6 local authority areas that all have a council. And that's really set within the economic body for our city region. And then we work above that at the European level, and are very happy to be here today joining you in Europe. And then at the global level, that also we extend into through networks like yourself. So it's really important to think about learning across the various geographical scales and bringing that learning back home again. So in terms of citizen involvement, again, I apologise for my slides not moving on, but in terms of citizen involvement, I'll just try and get to that slide.
Angela, if you want to leave it like that instead of presentation, we can see your slides now. So if you just want to move it like without putting the presentation on.
Would that be better? I'm very sorry. This worked perfectly.
Yeah, if you want to leave it like this, the way that it is now, we can see it perfectly. We have a very big screen. So if you're happy with us seeing a bit your notes, that's okay, or if you want to minimize your notes, that's okay.
So this was the slide I missed, so just as well. It's obviously about the wider collaboration, that the food strategy was as much about engaging people across the city as it was about producing actions. And as you can see, it involved a vast number of people and organisations here. And importantly, there was a real effort to include those groups that are vulnerable or hard to reach. So focus groups were held with, organised and held with ethnic minority communities, asylum seekers, refugees, and homeless people. That's just a picture of the journey to the Gold Sustainable Food Places Award I mentioned, and some images of people involved. There's a high visibility and openness through this work. The pledges, the geographical scales that I mentioned. And it's important to also mention that the coordination of the food strategy work is overseen by a food strategy expert panel, and they meet regularly to give oversight to this work. So this is the second section of the presentation, which is about enhancing citizen involvement and public support for transformative urban food policies. So we do this through consultations, newsletters, campaigns, courses, and events. So it's really demonstrating how we reach people in a range of formats that are accessible and positive and often fun. I could say that this work is also social innovation, where we're learning from, for example, the emergency food provision, like what's happened over the COVID-19 pandemic, how to inform the programmes and the future infrastructure in our city. We're also part of the Horizon 2020 Edible City Solutions, and we work with France and Belgium on the Flavour project about sharing learning about surplus food redistribution. So just to summarise here, we take a whole city approach where there's opportunities to engage, to reach diverse communities, and there's ongoing research and insight. Brighton Whole Food Partnership is a trusted and respected organisation in the city and really can reach organisations and groups that we find it very hard to reach at the council. And in order to engage people in the conversation, I wanted to highlight that you have to accept you're going to get very different opinions. For example, having meat farmers and vegans in the same room. So good participatory facilitation is really important and worth investing in. I just wanted to show an example of an infographic where the Food Partnership, as I said, translate messages to be locally understood and relevant. They're very clear motivational messages, like this slide showing food as the missing ingredient for tackling the climate and ecological emergency. What's going wrong and what can we do? I'm just coming to the end of the presentation. This was a very recent campaign and event where we aligned with the National Sustainable Food Places Network. And here we saw really good partnership working between the council itself and what it could provide and support and amplify the messages and the activities that happened across the city with the Food Partnerships coordination. It was the Day of Action on Food and Climate that I mentioned before, and we managed to have activities across the city, right through from individuals, businesses, schools, community groups and organisations, up to employees at the council and the councillors themselves. So my last slide is about what communication tools worked well. I think you can see, and from the previous presentations, that online newsletters and websites, the ongoing consultations and surveys, campaigns, events, awards and courses, all of those are engaging, positive, dynamic, and really keep the work grounded and active. The communication tools that didn't work so well, and we still have work to do, there's a very long time to get feedback from the biggest decisions about land use and also the visibility of food systems in the city's future infrastructure. So that's my job as an intermediary, to try and get a real focus there. So there's much work still to be done as a city and the city region, but the signs are really, really positive. And we need to maintain focus and remain open to new ideas and learning from other cities like you. Thank you. I'm terribly sorry about my slides not moving on, but I'm very glad to be here.
Thanks, Angela, very much. We were able to see the slides at the end, so that was great, and thanks for the effort. I'm not sure if Kira is here. No, okay. So Kira is not here, so we're gonna move to the discussion. We'll have Angela and Hugo with us, and it will be time to take questions. So, Hugo, si quieres nos sentamos tú y yo aquí, así llenamos un poco más el...
Hugo, if you'd like to join me up here on the stage. The questions are open to anything you'd like to ask of Hugo or Angela. Unfortunately, we weren't able to ask Holly anything, or she can answer your emails. She generates a great deal of interesting documents, so I'm sure you can get information from her. And here we are now, ready to take your questions.
Just had a question for Angela, actually. I wondered if she could expand on her very last slide. She had a point that said visibility of food systems in the future, the city's future infrastructure was a communication tool that didn't work so well. Could you just expand on what that means, Angela, if you can hear me?
Hello. Hi, can you hear me, Ana? Okay.
Sí, yeah, we can hear you. Quizá podemos tener a Angela aquí la cámara, ¿puede ser? Así le vemos a ella también. We're just putting your face on the screen.
Oh dear.
Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for that question. I probably put that in as things that didn't work so well because it's something I'm working on right now. So it's probably very high in my own mind. But really, I put that in as something that's not worked so well because I've been involved in food policy work the last 2 decades. I was previously working in public health in the West Midlands, near Birmingham in the UK. And, we've known right from the beginning, as you've seen, Belo Horizonte, the originators of the work and what we saw with Baltimore, all the food mapping and about the physical environment and land use itself. So it's very clear that we need to be thinking in decades and even as much as 50 years, 100 years into the future. But hopefully you could see in my presentation, there's a lot of activity on the ground, a lot of work happening within the community with campaigns, a lot of work on, awards, all those things that help us communicate the urban food policies. But somehow during that, as the colleagues that have presented know, you have to reserve the time to influence the future infrastructure. And it is really difficult. It has been very difficult to get to that level. But I do see a lot of opportunity right now with the way that we can describe food systems, those maps and the data that Holly presented and the detail that we saw from Hugo's presentation, they give us confidence to have those conversations with planners, with architects, with the economic bodies that we have. In the UK, these are currently called local enterprise partnerships. And that's where I certainly see my role at the moment is ensuring I balance the time where we're working to engage our citizens with being able to strive, for those largest changes on land ownership and the physical environment. I hope that answered your question. Maybe the other speakers would expand on it as well.
Tenemos aquí una pregunta.
Sí, una pregunta para Hugo.
Question for Hugo. You mentioned the Municipal Food and Nutritional Safety Council. I think it is made up of 8 representatives from the municipal government and 16 from the civil society. So my question is, do the agreements that this council reaches, are there any problems implementing them? Are they always implemented? Does the municipal government take them as their own? Are there any discrepancies? How does that work? Thank you very much for that question. Yes, indeed. There are 24 members of this council, 8 from the public administration, 16 from civil society. What we decide on that council are the policies to be implemented as well. It is a debate space that generally decides the actions to be carried out by the public administration. So it's a very effective space for active listening, to work alongside the institutions, and in general, those who work on this council are people who may not be experts, but they could be experts, but they are also very interested in the work of food safety, whatever phase it's in terms of the production process or sales or knowledge generation or what have you. People who are very interested in this topic and who know about these policies, and they have this space as a space for exchange and for proposals. Clearly, that is one of the strongest points of our policy, to have so much involvement of society, which often in Latin America, if you talk about a 30-year policy, it's because it's been so successful. With changes of administration, oftentimes everything gets changed. This is one of our strong points, to have this broad participation of many sectors of the civil society, so that the political cost of any change not be that easy. That it not be easy to change things from one administration to the other. That's one of the keys to having political stability. Yes, and good morning. Thank you for all of these very interesting presentations. Going back to something that was mentioned earlier about professional farmers, professional ranchers, and producers, you mentioned at the beginning is one of the social groups that does not have time to participate. In Angela's presentation, there's something that I found very interesting. Communication directed directly to community garden growers, and another communication piece to support producers, but there was not a line of communication with farmers or farmers or producers. That's clear that farming and agriculture policy is not usually on the agenda for local councils, but the question is food policy without more communication with the production sector might seem a bit weak. Do you have any experience communicating with conventional farmers and ranchers who are practicing sustainable agriculture now? Could you speak a bit about your experience along those lines? I think that both of you can answer this question from Belo Horizonte, where you work with your agricultural sector. And Angela, are you listening?
Help to understand the question.
Okay, sorry, I thought you had translation, sorry. Danny, do you want to do it, or do you want me to translate?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Angela?
Thank you very much.
Presentation that there are some communication activities oriented to community garden growers, and also some communication oriented to supporting farmers. But I didn't see anything oriented to farmers. I understand that farmers are outside city, and sometimes are a difficult target to reach, no? And anyway, I was asking if you do something oriented to farmers, especially to conventional farmers, which are not developing sustainable ways of producing, and how do you understand this? Which channels, with which messages are they differentiated to organic farmers or to other different stakeholders? Thank you.
Thank you. That's the perfect question. Excellent question. So the food partnership has very strong links to urban farmers that are within the city, but also links out into the wider city region. I think I mentioned there that the work we're expanding our communications with the other councils in the area, and that's where that you get the urban and the rural and the peri-urban mix. So there is a very large it's called the South Downs National Park Authority, so a protected landscape with many farmers. I mean, the southeast of England is a productive farming area, and there's networks and actually farming collectives that exist there. So at the moment, in the current work, my role is to make connections through those communities and link them to the economic body, which is called the Greater Brighton Economic Board. And we're scoping the innovation that's going on there to have more regenerative, more nature-friendly practices that will make a difference to the climate emergency and sustainability. So absolutely, you're spot on with the question. I didn't go into detail in any area really in the presentation. I was just trying to give the overview, but that is a prime area of work that will be, the next few years will become increasingly active. And obviously it's a very interesting time with the changes that are taking place, certainly in the UK, in terms of those farmers, the requirements on them, and looking at supply, logistics, and the changes they'll have to make to transform practices. So thank you for the question.
Bueno, quizás también bien.
To be brief in answering you, in our case, we are a city that is completely urbanized. 93% of our territory is urbanized. We have a lot of green spaces, but it's interspersed throughout the city in different parks and things. Our farmers, our urban farmers, mostly are in the favelas. It is a low-income population and spaces that generally can't be used for construction or any other use. Basically, in those areas, we have a reference center in the social services center. These are offices where people exchange experiences, practices, they communicate, and farmers go there to get some technical support, but also to learn about health and agricultural practices and things. So there we do have the capacity to be in direct contact with them and meet with them and offer them support and training and other services. So in general, they're inside the city in an urban context. It's not hard for us to reach them and have this interaction and work together, supporting them the best way possible.
A question for Hugo. You talked about the Consejo de Alimentación Escolar. I think it's a very interesting concept. My understanding, I guess, is that it also has to do about reaching more schools and expanding the approach within the city. So my question is, what's the mandate of this council, and what are the kind of activities and strategies that are put in place to reach more schools? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. And se confunden las lenguas aquí, pero bien.
I'm getting my languages mixed up, but okay. When we speak of food safety for us in Belo Horizonte, it's something we've been discussing these days as well. It is a competency of the Belo Horizonte municipality to handle school lunchroom and school diets. Many of the efforts that we make and have made have to do with working not just in the context of offering healthy and safe food at school, and that includes all the practices and ideas that we have that stem from the food safety policy, but to work in the construction of these processes, involving students, involving teachers, involving parents, the whole school community, households, and the environment of the school, coordinators, officers of different offices, anyone who can have a role in this process. That is the competency of the public administration, of the municipal administration. So we have representatives from all of these groups, from students to parents to the people who cook the food, even the farmers and growers, so that they have the opportunity to work in the best way possible on all of the agendas that are implemented in schools, as they are related to food and diet, but also related to this training in public policy. And we call it awareness raising. I think it's a matter of raising the awareness of citizens through these actors in this council that is specifically based on food and diet, to attach the proper importance to it. Hello, good morning, and thank you for these presentations. I wanted to ask you about data of impact. Do you have data on how the consumption of locally produced food has increased because of these food policies? Do you have any data on that? And how do growers in the peri-urban areas see the city's food policies? Do they see it as an opportunity, as another sales channel inside the city?
I would like to know if you have measured the impact of the food policies in the increase of local food consumption in the city, and also about farmers. Are they really interested in urban food policies, or do you think that they don't really see local food policies, urban food policies, an opportunity to really sell their products directly in the city? Thank you.
And Angela, Hugo will start responding the question, and then you can jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bueno, gracias.
Thank you for that question. And no, I don't have data, but I do have the context, and I can send you the data if you'd like. But we form part of some networks that that's the case of ICLE and others, such as City Food and Surplus, so that the city can also work in this context in a more specific way and pay more attention to it. In our case, we have legislation that requires a significant part of the local production to be purchased by the municipality to supply schools, public institutions, soup kitchens. So through laws, we've created a mechanism that guarantees that local production will have a destination that is guaranteed, whether it be purchased by one or another person, but that it this also generates more involvement by the growers, creating a virtuous circle of production and consumption. And it's not just in the municipality, but the entire metropolitan area. There, we do have a higher level of production, a broader production, more diverse, because as I've said, the city itself is highly urbanized.
Ahead now.
Okay, so I understood the first question was about data. And yes, there's a lot of city level data that's been built up, not only through the food partnership and all the types of different engagement activities, and also the emergency food provision, and obviously recently the response to COVID. So there's a lot of data and intelligence through that. But then now with a food policy coordinator in post in the city, we hope to sharpen and improve the data. It will take us a while to get the kind of information you saw from Baltimore, but you can see what is possible. But having direct links, through to the regional economic bodies and to those data sources, we can learn more about businesses also and farmers, as you said, not just in the city, but the wider city region. And also nationally, in the UK, we recently had the launch of the National Food Strategy, where there's going to be requirements of more data from the large businesses, for example, about food. So I think the second part of the question was about our farmers, are they really going to be interested in the food policies? And again, as I was saying before, trying to develop networks and engagement in the same way as with citizens. Farmers are citizens too, in the area, and through the collectives that are forming. And for example, I mentioned that South Downs National Park Authority, that large area of protected landscape. These are the areas that we hope to have better communication of the food policies. They're going through a time of great change at the moment, and whatever support, that may be business support about engagement and marketing, even on tourism, that's where we hope to direct, the efforts within our city region. So the way to get them interested would be to basically listen and learn of their experience that they're going through now, what support they need. And at the moment, the biggest clues for me are to do with things like the regenerative farming, about changes linked to the climate emergency, and also certainly in the UK to do with, there's a lot of shortages of labour with changes that are happening now. So being able to support them where they need it. But yes, it's hard work, and I think there's a lot that we can learn from cities around the world. The work that Hugo's described, but other cities that will be sitting there today. Thank you.
Yes, thanks. Thank you for the presentations. Very, very interesting. It's a question for Angela, but also Ugo might want to make a comment. And it's also about city regions. I think, Angela, you explained well the importance of the city region in relation to agricultural production and the flows of food, and the importance of understanding that kind of dimension. But in some parts of the world, we've kind of found tensions between the recognition of the importance of city regions, but also the political realities of dealing with problems in your own municipality or in your own city. So although recognition is there, the sort of practicalities of life of having to deal with the problems within the city take precedence. And so there's a tension. Do you find any of those tensions, in especially amongst the representatives in Brighton and Hove, in terms of interacting with other municipalities in that region? And if you do, do you have any advice to other parts of the world about how to overcome those tensions?
Hi there. Thank you for that question. Yes, tensions definitely exist, and they probably always will. I'm quite new in post, but I'm quite old in the food policy work. But I've shifted from a public health focus into this economic development team that I'm in now. And I do think that positioning for our work in Brighton and Hove and the city region, that's the right place for now. Obviously, that can change over time. But there are tensions. We had approval from at the board level, the senior level, to scope the work, to start the work. But it's a time of change, again, with that economic body. So they are going through, as you say, the practical realities of everything else that's happening at your central government levels, but they have given recognition to food and its importance to build resilience and importance to tackle the climate emergency. So that's the start, which is fantastic. I do feel the contrast when you're working, like I said, with the food partnership and the engagement and the everyday work linked to the community and all those positive actions. And then when you are within those layers of government and geographies, you can feel the tensions in decision making. But I think it's the same thing. I think that just how we put the effort to communicate with young people, with people with different languages, with those that have different needs, that we have to also put the effort to communicate with the decision makers, which I believe you're doing with the conference you hold. So really, the way I see it, the food policy work, it's dynamic, it's active, it doesn't stop, it's ongoing, and it needs a philosophical as well as a practical and strategic approach if you're really going to create transformational change. And that's what I was meaning when I said about keeping some energy, that you can influence those bigger strategies and policies. So really, I see the food policy work is about many small transformations and a few large transformations. And it's about lining things up and developing meaning together. So, I think that was a great question. So yes, there's tension, but that tension can be put to good use, if we put the effort to communicate the focus of this session.
Well, just adding a brief comment. Maybe yes, when this policy in Belo Horizonte started, it was an issue, and we faced some. Well, I know that there was some difficulties and some tensions mainly, and because maybe as something new, as something started, as a new process, but currently, the Food Policy Secretariat works, supports, and cheers for them. So it might, it's one of its main representatives, and most of times the difficulties are more inside the public body than with the agricultors and producers. So kind of the secretariat the center of the daily work and is to try to address their expectations and demands as much as we can and as far as we can, and kind of they see us actually the Food Policy Secretariat more as a great partner than a co-creator and implementator of the policy and the agenda than anything else. So it's the main, basically the main interest of the Secretariat is having their aspirations and demands addressed. So currently the situation runs more smoothly as we have a nice arrangement and a long experience to deal and having all the participation bodies and to listening and trying to attend most of them.
Gracias, Hugo. Nos acercamos al final de la sesión. Creo que no había más manos levantadas. Entonces,
Okay, we're coming to the end of the session. I don't think there are any more hands raised. I would give you a brief summary and one final question. I think we've seen many tools that can be used: training, courses, participation spaces, consultation processes, campaigns, bulletins, awards, use of data. I really like what Hugo said about the use of public space as a communication space as well. The importance of building trust, legitimacy, the collective construction of knowledge. Something that Angela said is very important is to invest in communication, to invest in facilitation. So my last question, to not be the last person to talk, if you had any recommendation for a city that wanted to involve its citizens more, you've been working for some time, but what about a city that's just starting? What would be your recommendation to involve citizens more?
what would be your recommendation for a city that wants to engage more with its citizens around food? So a city that is starting to do this type of work, what would be your recommendation? You have half a minute each. So maybe Hugo starts.
Yes, gracias por la pregunta.
Thank you for that. And very simply, I would say, for a city in Latin America, this is very clear. It's a general challenge, and especially now with the pandemic, when we're going back to the map of hunger, Brazil and Latin America. Just in the past year, we have 20 million more people in poverty and 8 or 9 million more in extreme poverty. So lines of people who are foraging in the garbage, it's awful. So public administrations can't ignore this. And it must be a central public policy. Then we have global development agendas that are the groundwork for today's global development and in the next decades. We talk about food policy and safety. We're talking about sustainable development goals of the UN. 1, end of poverty. 2, no hunger. 3, health and well-being. And we could also talk about 11, sustainable cities and communities. 13, action on climate change. We also talk about the new urban agenda, talk about the Paris Agreement. We have Glasgow coming up in just 2 weeks. So this is an agenda that binds the main actors of global development, and it's fundamental for our cities, metropolitan areas, and territories. Therefore, being able to show this to citizens, but also to decision makers who, at the end of the day, are the elected officials, the people who can make a contribution that way, I think is a good strategy to begin a more assertive mobilization along these lines. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you, Hugo. How about you, Angela?
What would we recommend to cities that are starting out? The most important slide, and thankfully the slide that got stuck in my presentation, was about the approach. You know, the focus on the approach. So, really, you're trying to learn the creative potential of your city and your citizens. So the way that you develop your policy, the process, is the most important. So I definitely think some mapping of some type to understand your environment, the policy environment infrastructure, like Holly showed those maps. So some kind of mapping of the environment, but in that process, being able to engage and communicate and learn from people and fix things on the way. So gain time, try and fix things on the way. And also it's remembering that food is social, it's relational, and people, it's about identity. So it's being able to develop meaning through the work, that you grow confidence together as a city and your citizens. I hope that helps.
That's great, Angela, thank you very much. Gracias a todos y a todas por venir, los que estáis.
Thanks to one and all for attending on-site, online. I think everybody deserves a cup of coffee. So we'll see you in the lobby. Thank you very much.